Divorce is a subject that often elicits strong emotions and diverse opinions. For those who adhere to the teachings of the Bible, understanding God's perspective on marriage and divorce is crucial. From Genesis to Revelation, the Bible consistently portrays marriage as a sacred, lifelong covenant designed by God. In this article, we will explore key biblical passages that illustrate why divorce is considered against the will of God. By examining these scriptures, we aim to gain a deeper understanding of the divine intention for marriage and the spiritual implications of breaking this holy bond. Divorce, against the will of God, a biblical perspective. Divorce is a topic that evokes strong emotions and differing opinions. For those who adhere to the teachings of the Bible, understanding God's perspective on marriage and divorce is essential. Throughout the scriptures, from Genesis to Revelation, the Bible consistently presents marriage as a sacred, lifelong covenant. Here, we will explore key biblical passages that illustrate why divorce is considered against the will of God. Introduction to marriage in the Bible. Marriage is introduced early in the Bible as a divine institution. In Genesis, we see the foundation of this sacred union. Genesis 2 verse 24, NIV. That is why a man leaves his father and mother and is united to his wife, and they become one flesh. This verse underscores the unity and permanence intended for marriage. The one flesh concept signifies an inseparable bond that reflects God's original design for human relationships. The sanctity of marriage. Throughout the Old and New Testaments, the sanctity of marriage is emphasized. The prophet Malachi speaks directly about God's view on divorce. Malachi 2 verse 16, NIV. I hate divorce, says the Lord God of Israel, and I hate a man's covering himself with violence as well as with his garment, says the Lord Almighty. So guard yourself in your spirit and do not break faith. Here, God's aversion to divorce is explicit. It highlights the importance of faithfulness and the negative impact of divorce on individuals and communities. Jesus' teachings on divorce. In the New Testament, Jesus reaffirms the teachings from Genesis and emphasizes the original intention for marriage. When questioned about divorce, Jesus refers back to the creation narrative. Matthew 19 verses 4-6, NIV. Haven't you read, he replied, that at the beginning the Creator made them male and female, and said, for this reason a man will leave his father and mother and be united to his wife, and the two will become one flesh? So they are no longer two, but one flesh. Therefore what God has joined together, let no one separate. Jesus' words reinforce the idea that marriage is a divine covenant that should not be broken. He acknowledges that while Moses permitted divorce due to the hardness of people's hearts, it was not so from the beginning. Apostolic teachings on marriage. The Apostle Paul also addresses marriage and divorce in his letters. In his first letter to the Corinthians, Paul provides guidance for married couples. 1 Coríntios 7, 10-11, NIV. To the married I give this command, not I, but the Lord: a wife must not separate from her husband. But if she does, she must remain unmarried, or else be reconciled to her husband. And a husband must not divorce his wife. Paul's teachings echo the sentiment that divorce should be avoided, and if separation occurs, reconciliation is the preferred outcome. The symbolism of marriage. Marriage in the Bible is also a symbol of the relationship between Christ and the church. This metaphor underscores the depth and commitment expected in the marital relationship. Ephesians 5 verses 31-32, NIV. For this reason, a man will leave his father and mother and be united to his wife, and the two will become one flesh. This is a profound mystery, but I am talking about Christ and the church. The analogy of marriage to the union of Christ and the church highlights its sacred and unbreakable nature, further illustrating why divorce is contrary to God's will. Conclusion. Upholding the covenant. From Genesis to Revelation, the Bible consistently portrays marriage as a sacred covenant intended to be lifelong and unbreakable. While human frailty sometimes leads to divorce, the Scriptures advocate for faithfulness, reconciliation, and the sanctity of the marital bond. By adhering to these biblical teachings, believers can honor the divine intention for marriage and reflect God's unwavering love and commitment. Understanding the biblical perspective on divorce is crucial for those seeking to align their lives with God's will. It serves as a reminder of the sanctity of marriage and the importance of maintaining the covenant made before God. There are several other biblical verses that address the topic of divorce, providing further insight into the biblical perspective on marriage and the dissolution of this sacred union. Here are a few additional passages. Old Testament 1. Deuteronomy 24 verses 1-4, NIV. If a man marries a woman who becomes displeasing to him because he finds something indecent about her, and he writes her a certificate of divorce, gives it to her, and sends her from his house, and if after she leaves his house she becomes the wife of another man, and her second husband dislikes her and writes her a certificate of divorce, gives it to her, and sends her from his house, or if he dies, then her first husband, who divorced her, is not allowed to marry her again after she has been defiled. That would be detestable in the eyes of the Lord. Do not bring sin upon the land the Lord your God is giving you as an inheritance. This passage outlines the Mosaic law regarding divorce, highlighting the seriousness and the regulations surrounding the act of divorce and remarriage. New Testament 1. Matthew 5 verses 31-32, NIV. It has been said, anyone who divorces his wife must give her a certificate of divorce. But I tell you that anyone who divorces his wife, except for sexual immorality, makes her the victim of adultery, and anyone who marries a divorced woman commits adultery. In the Sermon on the Mount, Jesus teaches about the sanctity of marriage and the limited grounds for divorce, emphasizing the seriousness of the marital covenant. 2. Mark 10 verses 2-12, NIV. Some Pharisees came and tested him by asking, "Is it lawful for a man to divorce his wife?" "What did Moses command you?" he replied. They said, "Moses permitted a man to write a certificate of divorce and send her away." "It was because your hearts were hard that Moses wrote you this law," Jesus replied. "But at the beginning of creation God made them male and female. For this reason a man will leave his father and mother and be united to his wife, and the two will become one flesh. So they are no longer two, but one flesh. Therefore what God has joined together, let no one separate." When they were in the house again, the disciples asked Jesus about this. He answered, "Anyone who divorces his wife and marries another woman commits adultery against her. And if she divorces her husband and marries another man, she commits adultery." This passage reiterates Jesus' teaching on marriage and divorce, emphasizing the original divine intent for marriage to be an unbreakable bond. 3. Luke 16 verse 18, NIV. Anyone who divorces his wife and marries another woman commits adultery, and the man who marries a divorced woman commits adultery. Jesus speaks about the implications of divorce and remarriage, highlighting the gravity of breaking the marital covenant. 4. Romans 7 verses 2-3, NIV. For example, by law a married woman is bound to her husband as long as he is alive, but if her husband dies, she is released from the law that binds her to him. So then, if she has sexual relations with another man while her husband is still alive, she is called an adulteress. But if her husband dies, she is released from that law and is not an adulteress if she marries another man. Paul discusses the binding nature of marriage under the law, using it as an analogy for the believer's relationship with the law and with Christ. These verses collectively underscore the biblical perspective that marriage is a lifelong covenant designed by God, and divorce, while sometimes permitted due to human failings, is generally viewed as contrary to God's original plan for marriage.
In exploring the biblical perspective on divorce, it becomes clear that the scriptures consistently portray marriage as a sacred, lifelong covenant designed by God. From the foundational teachings in Genesis to the reaffirmations by Jesus and the apostles, the Bible emphasizes the sanctity and permanence of the marital bond. While human frailty sometimes necessitates divorce, it is generally seen as contrary to God's divine plan. Understanding these biblical principles helps us appreciate the gravity of marriage and the spiritual implications of divorce. For believers, aligning with God's will mean striving to uphold the sanctity of marriage and seeking reconciliation and healing wherever possible. We invite you to share your thoughts and experiences on this topic. Please leave a comment below, and don't forget to like this video if you found it insightful. Subscribe to our channel for more discussions on biblical teachings and how they apply to our lives today. Thank you for joining us, and we look forward to hearing from you.